Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We'll give it a few more minutes since we don't have a quorum yet. Need one more and then we'll hit quorum.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Angela.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays.
Hey. Well, we have now hit quorum. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Crooms, the current chair of the Performance Management Committee, and I want to welcome everyone to the December 2023 meeting of the Performance Management Subcommittee. We have what looks to be a lighter agenda for today. So we'll certainly move through things. And if we finish early, great. If there's other business that comes up, we can certainly address those things as well. First off, I do want to, I know Tracy's not on the phone on the call yet, but I want to thank her for chairing last month's meeting in my absence. I really appreciated that, and she did a great job. And thank you to Shantae as well for continuing to do our minutes. First thing I'll open up is to see if anybody has any public comments that they might like to make. Okay, no public comments. I do see that we perhaps have a guest, Aaron Foster. Aaron, if you'd like to tell us who you are and what brings you to the meeting.
Sure. So I'm a diversion case manager on the entry point team on the Volunteers of America side. So I'm sitting in for Nicole, who is out. I don't think she'll mind me sharing. Her son is getting married, so she'll be out for a couple of weeks. I'm just taking all of her meetings in the meantime. So
Glad to have you. All right. Moving right along. First item for review is the November 23 minutes. Shantae, thanks again for doing those minutes, and the floor is open for any corrections or suggestions that may need to be made to them.
I don't have any suggestions or corrections, but I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Eliza Matthew to adopt the November 2023 minutes as prepared.
Happy Friday Eve. This is Vega Swepson. I'd like to second that motion to adopt those minutes from November the 9th.
Okay, we have a second from Vega Swepson. Any other comment or discussion? Okay, if we could move to vote in the chat box. Right, minutes have been approved. Moving right along, we are going to revisit the review of the satisfactory performance threshold policy that we began discussing last month. Obviously, I wasn't here part of that discussion, but I did look in the minutes and see what some of the things were that were brought up. The Community Development Department has also prepared a memo for us, kind of laying out some of the pros and cons of raising that threshold policy score from 65 to 70%. And so I'm opening the floor up for any further discussion, comments on this proposal. So I'm going to just ask a question. Since I was not able to be here last month, what was the sense of the group about whether this was something we wanted to look at doing? Were there trepidations? Did we feel like it's time to raise the bar?
I am trying to remember the conversation from last meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the raising to 70%.
Correct. Yeah. So right now, the satisfactory project score is 65%. And so anything under 65, we have the discretion of putting a project onto a performance improvement plan. If that performance doesn't improve, we then have the discretion to look at reallocating those funds to another higher scoring project in the COC. Okay, Renee, go ahead. I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I do recall the conversation. I'm not sure why it is we would need to raise it. It seemed, from what I remember, there were not many instances where the original threshold had been met. So I'm not sure if we should.
Mm-hmm. So Lloyd, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that, as I explained, I think in the memo that was sent out yesterday, and apologies for not getting it out to you sooner, but most of our projects are at 65% or more. And while the department, as the lead agency, is not recommended moving beyond the 70% threshold, this year, I think that in efforts to encourage all of our projects to continually, to embrace continuous improvement aspects and approaches, that we really would want to encourage our projects to continue to strive to improve project performance. The only project that did not meet the 65% threshold in the last evaluation we did for the ranking in the 2023 COC competition was Streets to Home 2, and I looked at why they scored at the 60.4% level in their 2023 evaluation, and the big reason was that they had a significant amount of unspent funds in their previous grant year, and that cost them a full 20 points. So if they had spent all of their funds and not lost any funds, they would have been at like 69.7, which would have been rounded to 70%. So I think 70% is eminently doable if projects focus on continuous improvement in overall performance. And I think raising we think at the COC lead agency that raising the bar, does give an important message to our projects that we want to see them continuing to work on improving all aspects of project performance. And if they're not, the idea of a performance improvement plan gives projects the opportunity over a year or two to focus more specifically, as well as taking advantage of technical assistance through the lead agency and perhaps through HUD as well, to look at what needs to happen to improve project performance so that we can have confidence that our projects are performing well.
Okay, I've got two hands up. I think I saw Eliza first and then Shante. So Madam Chair, I'm going to go to you first and then we'll get Shante.
Thanks, Jonathan. I guess I have a couple questions. I'm curious about, I know one project scored below 65% last year, but I think it would be helpful to just hear again, if we were to raise it to 70%, our other projects, did other projects score under 70% last year? And I think my second question is, it would be great to understand the process with the performance improvement plan. And I'm not sure if anybody here has had experience with that, but understanding kind of what that looks like and the capacity piece for folks, right? So if we're kind of setting ourselves up to raise the bar, but then there may be more projects that fall underneath, what does that look and feel like for our providers who go through that process? So those are my two questions.
Okay,
Lloyd, do you want to go ahead and respond to?
Yeah, I can respond to that before we move to Shante, if that's your pleasure. So the memo indicated that last year in the first evaluation of 2023, I'll pull that up. I think Fresh Start was below the 65%, or excuse me, was below. Let me pull up the memo because I have it there. Right, so Urban Ministries scored at 69.2 in the first evaluation of 2023. So they, if the threshold had been raised at that point to 70%, they would have been asked to complete a performance improvement plan. And then in the second evaluation, only Streets at Home 2, as I mentioned, scored at 60.4%. So they were the only ones. Everybody else, including Fresh Start, was above 70% in the second evaluation. In terms of what a performance improvement plan entails, when we did do it in I think in 2019, we looked at where the projects scored poorly on the evaluation tool and invited the organization and staff to focus and develop like a 1 or 2 page outline of what they would intend to do to improve performance, specifically in the areas where they scored poorly. And we would have that performance improvement plan reviewed by by this committee and approved by the committee, and then the project with the lead agency would work to implement the specific strategies outlined in the performance improvement plan over the next year to improve performance in some of their low performing areas. If anybody else who was involved in that in 2019, I think Jonathan, you might have been on the committee at that time, if you have recollections of that process. Welcome to chime in as well as anybody else on the committee.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a memory. I mean, I remember we did it, and and then, I mean, it created a little bit of more work for I think it was urban ministries, right? So, they put that together and they did a great job with it. And, I think they implemented it and it worked. So, I mean, it is, and from my perspective in raising the bar, I mean, we have to be willing to, to do that, and probably more often, because it does seem like, we might have, we tend to have maybe one or so project that scores under. So it's something we kind of have to be prepared to do if we're going to raise the bar. During COVID, we did have some projects that scored under, but, given COVID, we gave them a pass.
And can I ask one more follow-up question? Thanks. What happens if someone goes through the performance plan and there is not an increase in the score above 70%? Like, is there like kind of, what are the next steps that one would take, or decisions that may come from this body or others?
Well, I think that's, and I will certainly answer that, and then we'll take some more questions here. I mean, ultimately, what it kind of comes down to is whether or not we think that it is worth reallocating those funds to another higher performing project. And a couple of years ago, we were looking at having to do that with Home Again. But as I recall, I believe the Housing Authority had decided to end that project. So we didn't necessarily formally have to say to them, we're going to reallocate your funds due to low performance. But I mean, essentially, that's where we're looking at is, having to weigh, do we think that the project, in spite of the low score, is, needed such that we're going to continue to fund it, or do we feel like those funds could be better used if we reallocate them to another higher scoring project? All right, I want to get, so Shante, I know it looks like you lowered your hand. Do you still have a question?
Yes, I have a comment.
Okay, so we'll go to Shante and then Tracy.
Thank you. I think Tracy brought up this last time we discussed this, but I'm thinking about it again. So when you look at the scores, is there a way to kind of narrate those scores? Because I think Tracy brought up just it being sheer data and versus what's really behind the data, what's happening on the ground. So like for Streets to Home too, they didn't spend all their money, partially because so many of that population of that project, they had received vouchers. And so we were no longer financially assisting them. So like that kind of explains why they didn't spend all their funds for that year. But like just for other projects, what happens on the ground? So you talk about the housing market, you talk about some of the high barriers of clients that are in the system and that projects are receiving. What other things are causing these numbers to fall below the 70%? And I think that's a really good point. If I'm not mistaken, Tracy made up last time. So I wanted to kind of revisit that point this time as well.
Thank you, Shante. And Tracy, go ahead.
Hey there, good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I'm running behind. I was coming late from another meeting. But yeah, well, we were kind of having this discussion last time. We were talking about just at least, we look at the data from a very macro level and not having a narrative to kind of help give some insight as to what is behind the numbers, because if we're practicing housing first and we're trying to practice that in theory and in practice, you know, there are individuals behind that, there are programs behind it, there are staff behind those numbers. And so I think it's always, you know, for us to be mindful to probably, if someone else outside of our realm of the HSAC is looking at this, to kind of have some type of narrative that helps explain some of the data that, you know, we're looking at and making decisions on, because the data doesn't always tell the full story. And also, are there other things that the lead agency can be doing prior to? I know the numbers, the data really is indicative of performance, but as Shante was saying also, oftentimes there are shifts in projects where the person is, you know, they've applied for a voucher, and so you're not using your funds to house them. You have other funds to be able to assist other people to bring them into a program. However, you're also having to strike a balance with their housing barriers. Many of the individuals that are chronically homeless who touch our system, the HSAC system, have lots of housing barriers, whether that's a prior eviction, whether that's a criminal involvement or criminal justice involvement, whether that's not having a job or any type of benefits to support them. It's a lot more complex than saying, okay, we get the funds and we provide housing for this person to support them in their housing and also in their overall success of being a tenant. But it's easier said than done. And sometimes the numbers don't always necessarily tell the full story about why a program may be at a certain level versus the higher. And I think we need to just be mindful of that I think the metrics, we always need data. Data can share with us, you know, so much information about a program and overall performance and meeting benchmarks. However, I think a narrative and more information when others are looking at this information kind of brings it into context around their overall performance.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Well, I knew there'd be more opinions on this. So I'm glad folks have spoken up. I was a little surprised at the beginning when, go ahead, Eliza.
Yeah, so I read the memo and I read it yesterday and I was trying to look back at it today. And maybe I missed this as I was like trying to listen and read. I understand HUD's that they would like to see some sort of increase. Like that makes sense to me. Is there some explanation around why the 5% increase? Like, is that what we normally do? Like, I think, and is that something that is an increase every couple of years? Or, because to me, it also feels like, could the increase be smaller if this is going to be revisited every year? And it would be helpful to understand a little bit more context of the 5%. What I'm gleaning is it seems like most of our projects fell above the 70%, and that may be why, but I didn't know if there was more context to that.
I can reply to that, Jonathan, if you'd like.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, I do think a 5% increase from 65 to 70% seemed reasonable for us at the COC lead agency. It's about, I think, around a 7% increase from 65. 5 points is about 7% of 65%. So it seemed a reasonable increase. I think certainly also a round number that is easily the kind of benchmark rather than 67, 68%. And I think HUD consistently is asking COCs to evaluate project performance as well as to reallocate low performing projects. And while HUD doesn't, HUD does offer some project evaluation tools, and really our evaluation tool is modeled in many ways in terms of the areas that we evaluate is modeled on what HUD really invites us to evaluate in terms of project performance. So we're looking at things that HUD itself recommends that that COCs look at when they evaluate project performance. We've added to that in several different areas as well. In looking at, for example, in how projects are accepting people with high needs or high barriers into the project. As I mentioned, I think in the memo, I think the evaluation tool seeks to balance the realities that Tracy and Shantae mentioned in their comments with an evaluation tool and that provides opportunities for projects to score well. It does have some challenging areas. Again, projects lose points if they don't score, if they don't spend all of their funding from HUD. Yes, there can be reasons to not spend all of the money, but when projects are not doing so, that can suggest to the COC and certainly to HUD that funds are not needed to, you know, in the community. And so it really is a something that I would think as a COC, we would want to say to all of our projects, we need you to spend all of these funds. We expect you to spend all of these funds. And when it's not happening, it's an issue of grave concern for us as a COC, because there are always more people needing to be housed in our community than we have funds to assist with. So so it is a balance. I think we're suggesting that 70% seems a reasonable level of improvement. One of our members of our team suggested, you know, should we increase it more than 70%? They suggested 75%. So, you know, I think 70% is a good evaluation level. I think, you know, the 65% threshold at the initially in 2019 was chosen because that seemed to be pretty consistent with other evaluation standards, particularly in educational in the educational realm, where 65% is or less is considered a failing grade, and above that is at least marginally satisfactory.
All right, we have Tracy and then Vega. So go ahead, Tracy.
So I'm listening to NPR yesterday on the way back from a meeting, and they were doing a segment on the presentation that Urban Ministries did to the county commissioners to ask for $72 million for a 7-story multi-use homeless service center. So I'm just wondering, you know, as a subcommittee to the HSAC, how does their scoring and performance with the funds they already received from the CFC is going to possibly impact their request for $72 million from not only the city but the county to support this this project?
That's a good question. And candidly, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the supposedly the county commissioners and the city council has said that, you know, there is a need for something such as what's being proposed by Urban Ministries. I don't know if they have the staff capacity or they will have all the funding for this to be built by 2026. However, I'm trying to tie all the ends together in terms of having received funding for, you know, through ESG as well as the COC for their shelter and some of the other projects they're involved with. And now they will possibly be asking for support from the city and county to support this homeless service center, which is very grand and probably necessary for the city in terms of being able to support those individuals who are homeless and experiencing some level of homelessness. But I'm just curious as to how this will play out, because I'm pretty sure they will probably come to the city to ask about their prior performance with the funding they've received to assist those who are home. I don't think COC funding is probably their only source of funding. However, I just throw that out because that made me pause yesterday when I was listening to this report on the NPR locally.
So Lloyd, I'm thinking you're probably raising your hand to respond.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the COC funding, that Urban Ministries receives for the Fresh Start project would not have any impact on funding for this expansion of the shelter, because the Fresh Start project is specifically for rapid rehousing for people coming out of the shelter program. And so would not be used to fund operations of a homelessness service center or an expanded shelter in any way. Now, how the administration or the management of the Fresh Start project could be impacted by Urban Ministries, perhaps losing focus of the importance of managing the Fresh Start project well. Certainly there could be some challenges there.
All right, Vega, go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Tracy, thank you for that information in reference to Urban Ministries. And also thank you for your comment about knowing those details to align with the numbers that we see on paper. What's the backstory behind that would be helpful. I guess I had a point of clarity. Maybe Lloyd can help me with this. The bonus points that folks received, I know some of the agencies received bonus points, and that got them to where they were, whatever that number was. Some of those agencies did receive bonus points, and that got them to about 65 or whatever the case might be. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I think ultimately we want to see an increase. We want to see folks rise to the number of about 70. But my question is, do we have them do that encouragement over a period of another year or two? I know in light of the pandemic, agencies and folks are still dealing with that and trying to recover and bounce back, if you will. So then my question is, should there be a recommendation over time, or do we say, hey, 70, we strongly encourage 70? Because we do want to see growth, we want to see improvement. How can we support in that effort, I guess, is key too for the agencies. And I guess that ties back to what Tracy pointed out about, the numbers are there, but then what else goes with those numbers for, that would be very helpful to know. Thank you.
So I'm going to take a crack at that a little bit. I'm sort of torn on this as well. I mean, I think 70% is definitely a good number to aspire to. And thinking back to my grades and to grades in school, 65 feels like a D, barely passing. And so I think 70% is a good number to aspire to, and to ask folks to try to reach. We do have discretion on how we respond to a low scoring project. We, as far as I can remember from the policy, I don't believe we're locked into anything. I mean, we certainly, when COVID came, we voted to not do a performance improvement plan. So we depending on what what it is that we think needs to be improved, I mean, I think we have room there to, to set, a timeline, that's reasonable. So it's, this isn't the kind of thing that happens overnight, so to speak. Yes, of course, we evaluate the scores, we talk about them, and then, as I recall, I believe, and this is a couple years ago, I think we actually met, or at least maybe some of the staff may have met directly with Urban Ministries. So it's not meant to be punitive. It is, it's just a way to evaluate and help us, help the project move forward. I mean, I don't know that anybody necessarily wants to have to make the decision, do we reallocate and take funds away from a project? But I think that's sort of a last resort, the way I look at it. So, I want to say, to me, if we decide to vote on this today, we're voting more on a process, which we do have some room on, to adapt to the particular circumstances. And I think somebody else had their hand up and may have taken it down.
I did.
Okay, go ahead, Renee.
I had just had wanted to just reiterate, wondering how it is that we could annotate or add an appendices or something to the data that is being collected to help broaden that full story that Tracy and others have been talking about. That's something that we do with our grants and contracts. So I was just wondering if that was something we could begin to add.
So I do have a response on that question. So I know at least when Melissa collects the data, as part of our benchmark review, I mean, there's an opportunity to explain, to explain any anomalies or irregularities or kind of unusual results from that particular, quarter. In terms of, I believe there's also a similar thing on the COC application, if I'm not mistaken, Lloyd, that there is some room for explanation, but I defer to you on that one.
In terms of the COC collaborative application, I'm not sure what we would be referring to. I mean, HUD does ask us consistently whether we have reallocated. I think HUD, based on my experience with the collaborative application, is expecting COCs to reallocate about 20% of the annual COC funds at least once in any 5-year period. Durham was able to meet that threshold when we reallocated home again, and the DCRC Rapid Rehousing Project in the 2021 competition. But every 5 years comes around every 5 years, so it needs to be an ongoing consideration. I think in my mind, having worked in this arena, perhaps on the collaborative application and reallocations since about 2010 at least, I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable to expect all of our projects to be performing at really an 80% level or above. But I do think, and we think, I think as the COC lead agency, that increasing the threshold for satisfactory performance, the consequences are really kind of minimal, at least initially, in that if they don't meet that threshold, they're asked to submit a performance improvement plan, and that is intended to help projects focus on improving performance. And the monitoring, evaluation, and ranking policy that is referenced, and there's a link in the memo To that, clearly outlines that process, as well as outlines the process for making a decision as a COC to reallocate a low performing project. And really what we're saying, I think, as a COC, and what this committee would be saying, is that this is not punitive. It is simply an acknowledgement that, you know, we want our projects to continuously strive to improve project performance. Yeah, these are challenging times, but that really is always the case when we are working with people experiencing homelessness. They are have a lot of challenges, and the overall climate of the housing market in Durham doesn't show any signs of abating in terms of you know, reductions in the inflationary pressures on rental prices, as well as, you know, other people from other areas of the country moving in and driving up housing costs and mortgage rates, etc. But all that being said, we know that we have large numbers of people needing housing assistance. That also is not going away, and so we really need our projects to do the best they can. And part of doing the best they can would be to really develop a performance improvement plan and get assistance from us and or HUD if they are not performing very well. And it's, you know, performance improvement plan is just a guide. The performance evaluation plan, excuse me, the performance evaluation is just a guide. It's not the be all and end all. Yes, I mean, we can, you know, ask, you know, projects can appeal and share more information with this committee as to why they're struggling. But why they're struggling can be also, I would think, would help inform a performance improvement plan.
Thanks, Lloyd. Tracy, you've got your hand raised again. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to be clear. I'm not opposing the 70% as the threshold. I do think we need to have a standard, if not higher, for us all to have a bar to aspire and reach towards, and that we're all trying to improve along the continuum, different measures to improve in our processes and help those who are impacted by homelessness the most. However, I'm just wondering, yes, I don't want it to be a punitive process. However, the way it's worded is that in this memo, it says asking lower performing projects to develop, submit, implement a PIP can be used to demonstrate to HUD on the collaborative application that the COC is working with its projects to improve performance. I think in part, it's not so much, it's kind of twofold. I think that organizations who do fall below the 70% threshold need to probably devise a plan of action that they can implement and create a PIP. However, I think the local COC needs to help them also to identify what areas that need to be improved so they can provide either technical assistance or refer them to HUD to be able to improve those different areas and where they're showing a sign of weakness, whether it's, you know, it's their intake process, or whether it's assisting people to exit from their program, whatever the case may be. I don't think it's necessary, because if you're asking for the organization who's already struggling to do a self-assessment on how they can improve, I don't know if they can. Some may be able to, but I'm just saying, I think the COC lead agency should also help them in devising that plan of action, so they're understanding what areas that they need to improve upon. It's just not a matter of just saying, oh, create a PIP and it will be, you know, we'll follow up with HUD in terms of it being written. A lot of times we're writing plans out that aren't necessarily HUD's going to say, okay, we have this documented, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to be able to say, okay, this has been improved based on an annual number. Maybe something that's done quarterly or something that's done more than once a year for that agency to be able to make some improvements would probably go a long way in terms of their overall strength of their performance measures that are being submitted annually. That's just my 2 cents.
I think those are all great points. And I think if we were in that situation where we had to do a performance improvement plan, I think we can do that in that way. I mean, we can lay out lay out what we see as the issues. We can meet, face to face. I think we have a lot of room there to do it in a collaborative and partnership way. And Lloyd, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add something to that too?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So here we are. Do we think we want to vote on this item today? Or do we not feel ready to vote or even to make a motion?
For me, I feel like I would be prepared to vote. I think this conversation has been really helpful, and I think that perhaps there's an opportunity to have a second conversation about the improvement plans, to kind of get clear about our process and supporting organizations, or what that could look like. But from what I've heard today, it's helped me understand this better, and I feel prepared to vote.
Okay. So I will admit, I'm not quite sure I have the full grasp of the temperature of the group at this point.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my to raise my hand thing. But my thoughts are that, is there a way to not vote yet and give the low scoring project a opportunity to raise their score, and then we come as a full body, such as like we're presenting this toward, like we say, everything goes to Congress. Everybody's seeing these scores to show a way that Durham is united and we're coming together, and this is what our projects are high scoring, and not just show like we get this high score and we're going to take the money from this one, as we've done in the past before. Is there a way not to vote on it yet, but give that organization a chance to work on it and the city work with them to improve?
Well, so let me lay out the options today. So the only thing we are potentially looking at voting on today is, do we raise the satisfactory project score from 65 to 70%? So as far as I know, there's not any sort of imminent action that we have to take on any projects. We're just looking solely at, do we raise the score today? And we can take that vote, or if the group does not feel ready to vote on this, somebody could make a motion to, table this proposal for a time, or no one can make a motion. And then at that point, I would conclude as chair that, either we're not ready to vote on this, or we don't want to, or we don't agree with changing it. So I would say, when we reallocated funds from Home Again, I don't think by the time that came around, I don't think it was a surprise. I mean, it's again, this is not like the performance improvement process is not like something that's just going to happen overnight. We're not gonna, it's not going to be like a instant type penalty thing. I mean, there's time for things to be worked out. And as I see it, it is, to me, reallocation would be kind of a last resort. I appreciate Lloyd reminding us that HUD does expect 20% of the funds to be reallocated every 5 years. That is a good reminder that is sort of an expected part of the process. But there's time there. There's time to work with the agency. There's time for them to put the plan in place. So again, the only thing we are potentially looking at today is, do we think the minimum score should be higher?
And just to confirm, if we take the vote today, when will it be effective?
So I would imagine that would be effective immediately. So we do, two COC scorings a year. We do one in the spring, one in the fall. So I would expect it to be immediately. Go ahead, Eliza.
I'm assuming folks have already submitted projects under the assumption of the 65%. Is that true? Do we have folks in the pipeline?
So I believe the COC, go ahead, Lloyd. That's all you.
Yeah, that's a great question. This threshold would be applicable to the 2024 evaluation that is coming up in the first quarter of 2024 of our COC funded permanent housing projects. I'm assuming if the committee is not in favor of raising the threshold for satisfactory performance to 70%, it would remain at 65% unless somebody wants to suggest that it's be lower than that. It's certainly possible that, for example, Streets to Home 2 would score in the first evaluation 2024, that it would score below 65%. And based on that, be asked to prepare and submit a performance improvement plan because it scored below 65%. Really, the impact of raising it would be that if a project scored between 65 and 70%, for example, they would be asked to submit a performance improvement plan as well. By comparison, if the rate were left at 65%, projects that scored between above 65%, whether it was 68% or 73%, would not be asked and expected to complete and implement a performance improvement plan. And the idea of a performance improvement plan, we typically have not asked projects to submit a performance improvement plan after the second semi-annual evaluation of performance, which is done in the third quarter in conjunction with the annual COC competition. That evaluation is used for ranking projects for funding. The implication of the significance of that ranking is that the lower performing projects are ranked in in order of their score, and lower performing projects are at risk of losing funding because of the way HUD has structured the tier 1 and tier 2 funding levels in the annual competition. For example, by way of reminder, in the 2023 competition, I think the tier 1 funding, which was more or less assured if projects met threshold, was at 95% of all of the money that was needed to fully fund all of our renewal projects. So 5% of the amount of money needed to fully fund our renewal projects was placed into tier 2, and we haven't yet received HUD's HUD's announcement of how we scored in the 2023 competition and whether or not any of our projects would lose lost funding because they were in tier 2. But the Sweet Home 2 project was ranked in a portion of that was in tier 2. I don't think all of it was. I think they've confirmed that by going back to our records, but so I mean that aspect of the competition is very real when the annual competition is done.
Okay, go ahead, Renee.
Excuse me. I was just wondering if we did need to have some notification process. It seems as if it begins January 1 with the upcoming scoring process, then whatever has already taken place, there wouldn't be an opportunity for them to know that there would be a scoring change. Or say, for instance, if they scored below 65%, if we raise it to 70, it looks, it really gives them 5 additional points. It just, to me, it appears as though it would be more damaging. But I was just wondering, Lloyd, is it possible to delay this if we do increase the threshold to 70, to delay it until 2025? Or
certainly it's the discretion of the committee. I mean, somebody can make a motion that we recommend to the HSAC that the threshold be raised to 70% with the 2025 evaluations and not with 2024. That's certainly an option.
So as your chair, I think I finally have the temperature of the room on this issue. Here's what I think I'm reading from everybody here and from their comments. I think that the group as a whole supports the idea, at least, of having a higher standard. I think where the anxiety and the concern lies is with how the performance improvement process would actually be implemented. Is that fairly accurate? Or
I would think, yeah, I would think so. That's kind of my concern in terms of the PIP process and how that will be outlined, and also providing whichever agency is going to be subject to that, being able to have a clear way of them being able to provide that information, also the data to support what areas they need to improve upon. I think that's probably my area of contention around that.
Okay. So that leaves us with a couple options here. We could vote on just the idea of raising the standard today, but with the acknowledgement that perhaps we need to do some work on what our actual project improvement process would look like. Maybe lay that out a little bit. Or we could just postpone voting on this until we have maybe a little more clear picture about, in general, what the time frame would look like on the performance improvement process. But that, I think, is where I think we're struggling, is what is a fair performance improvement process, look like time-wise in terms of support. So, those are, I think, where we're at. And so maybe it's a matter of what the committee would like to do on this. Do we want do we need some more information about how we would do this?
Also, could I ask a clarifying question? Lloyd,
Sure.
would the scores be used from 2023 to determine starting this in 2024? Or are we looking at fiscal year 24-25, which may begin July 1st? So could you provide some time frame?
Yeah, thanks. So the two comments. One, the process of developing a performance improvement plan is described in the monitoring, evaluation, and ranking policy in the procedures. Jonathan, I don't know if you want, I think there's a link earlier in this memo to that monitoring, evaluation, and ranking policy that you may want to pull up. In terms of the evaluation periods for the first evaluation of 2024, we will be evaluating performance of the projects for calendar year 2023. And then for the rankings in the second evaluation for the COC competition, we use the performance of the projects for July 1 of 2023 forward through June 30th of 2024. So it's kind of every cycle of evaluation moves up 6 months. So there's discussion. I think in this area of the ranking evaluation, monitoring ranking evaluation, there's discussion of performance improvement plans.
There we are. Projects would have a maximum of 2 years to improve performance to the satisfactory performance level.
The idea is that they're improving performance by at least 30% a year. And that's described as well in number 9 there at the top of page 3.
Projects placed on probation would be required to develop a performance improvement plan with the COC lead agency within 45 days of being notified of the decision. The PIP should address the performance issues identified through the evaluation. The PIP will be reviewed at the next regularly scheduled meeting of a COC board designated subcommittee. If the PIP is not approved by a COC board designated committee, the committee may recommend to the COC board that some or the entire project's COC funds be reallocated in that year's COC competition. So what do we think, committee? Does this help?
Well, it definitely provides the context with the timeline and also the 2 years, and also what benchmarks will have to meet within that 2-year span to bring them up to the 70%, or at least meeting the threshold.
So we are a little bit after 11. I do need to save time for the other, well, really there's one other item here on the agenda. So what I would suggest is whatever, that we wrap up whatever this issue, at least for the moment. If somebody feels moved to make a motion, we can. If nobody makes a motion, then I will assume that we are just not ready to approve an increase.
is it possible to move to make a motion, but also make sure that the policy is cited for reference to the PIP? Because in reading that memo, you really don't, it kind of loses sight of the fact that an agency would have 2 years to meet the expectations of improving their score.
Mhm. So I would say, I mean, you can make the motion, phrase it however you would like. I mean, this policy is in place, so, I guess I would say I wouldn't be, as the chair, too concerned that it wouldn't be followed because we have it to follow, but you can make that part of a motion, absolutely. Okay, Eliza, got your hand raised.
Thanks. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I think in elevating that language, it's more for those that would be impacted by this change as a reminder. I'm not sure if it's specific to this motion we're making, but how do we communicate well that timeline looks the way it does? Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that's the way I heard it.
Sure.
So, I'm happy to make a motion if no one else wants to.
Okay. Go for it.
Also, don't want to push this if we're not ready to vote.
And you know what? It's okay if we're not ready to vote. Somebody can make a motion to, postpone a vote till the next meeting. I'm just giving an example. I, as the chair, am, I'm not, I'm not going to make the motions. I'm not really. So I'm trying to steer us some direction here. I just need to know what it is we want to do, at this point. If we need more time, that's okay. The competition, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, it's not, we don't usually start looking at this until what, February, March. So, I mean, I don't, unless Lloyd, unless there's an absolute, like, we should have this done today, we can have some more time on it if need be. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do then. As chair, I'm going to end the conversation on this today and recommend that everybody spend a little more time with this memo and policy, and I will put this on the agenda for next month and to revisit. And then maybe that can have give some folks some more time to kind of work through these things. I'm happy to talk with folks offline as well. Any other questions, and I'm sure Lloyd is too. So I do need to, I do want to make sure we get through the rest of the agenda. But I think probably that might be the most reasonable thing that we can do at this point, because I don't get the sense that there's a strong desire to make a motion today. So we'll go ahead, we'll end the conversation there. And we'll revisit it next month. All right. Last item on the agenda would be an update on the 2024 Housing First evaluation. So, for those of you all who were, at HSAC yesterday, I did provide a brief update. We've got 12 volunteers who have agreed to participate. We definitely need a few more, and we're going to be doing this, over a couple months in the spring. And Lloyd, I'll turn it over to you if you have any other updates as well.
I'm sorry, I don't have any other updates regarding the Housing First evaluation.
Okay.
The updates are basically what was shared at the HSAC meeting yesterday, is that we've got 12 volunteers, most of them, 9 of them, I think, coming from the HSAC, and we were supplementing that with a few other volunteers that have stepped forward as well and accepted an invitation. We're planning, I think, to supplement those 12 and perhaps a few more community volunteers with members of the lead agency staff here at Community Development to form 3-person teams for each of the 5 evaluations that we'll need, or 5 or 6. In fact, I think it is 6. Yeah, we have 6 evaluations that we need. So that's our plan.
Okay. Thank you, Lloyd. Any questions on this item? Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I did say at the beginning that I did expect that we would have some extra time, and if there was anything else that anyone wanted to bring up as new business. Admittedly, I will say I thought we'd have more time at this point, but I did say that, and I want to be true to my word and just ask if there are any other items that folks have that they would like to have addressed today or bring up.
Hi, Jonathan. I just wanted to just quickly bring up that we'll be starting the next round of project performance evaluations. So the agencies in our COC should be expecting an email within the next day or so, reminding them to submit their project performance data for the period ending September 30th. So I just wanted to go ahead and let the committee know to expect that. The agencies will have about a month to submit their data. So I think I have the date set to like January 17th, that they'll have until then to submit their project performance data. And that'll give me about a month to get the data all cleaned up and present that to performance management in February. At least that's the goal.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
What was the deadline again, Melissa?
January the 17th.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any announcements? Well, there's no, oh, go ahead, Lloyd.
I just want to remind committee members of the Homeless Memorial Day service next Thursday evening, a week from this evening at 6 p.m. at the Farmers Market Pavilion in Central Park. We have, I think, 31 people that died homeless this year or who had been recently homeless that will be acknowledging and commemorating their passing from our community this year. So invite and encourage people to plan to participate. It is an outdoor service, so dress for the weather as appropriate.
Okay, thank you for that reminder, Lloyd. Well, if there are no further announcements, there's no gift like time. So I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn, and we can adjourn early today.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn from Angela Holmes.
Second, Renee Vaughn.
And we have a second from Renee Vaughn. Thank you, everybody, for a great conversation today. I wish each of you a joyous and safe holiday season. And Tracy, you weren't on here when I at the beginning, but I want to say to you, thanks again for chairing last month. And I'll look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Happy
Good night, everybody.
holidays.